They are separated by geography, but they're all united by a common purpose: to defy and resist authoritarian rule.
The young people are disappointed because right now what we see are a bunch of dinosaurs who are sitting in a parliament.
Over the internet, we can have some kind of solidarity and some kind of to support each other mentally.
It's because the government tries to do something that is on their own interests instead of on the people's interests. So when they do that and the protests broke out,
Youth across Asia have formed a pan-Asian solidarity movement that operates in the virtual space, calling themselves the Milk Tea Alliance. Through popular social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook, they're pushing for democracy at home while resisting China's growing assertiveness as a regional power.
Social media today enables young people to connect so quickly that you can rouse millions, at least hundreds of thousands on the streets in a matter of minutes, and that is extraordinary.
So, what exactly is the Milk Tea Alliance besides being a hashtag for youth to vent their anger against their governments? What does the MTA want, and should governments be afraid of it? A new social media phenomenon has emerged in Asia. Calling itself the Milk Tea Alliance, the online solidarity movement is a loosely connected transnational network that brings together netizens from Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Thailand. They share a common hostility towards autocratic governments and are united in their fight for democracy. Through instant messaging and other social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter, they're able to lend moral support online to fellow netizens to push for political change in their respective domains. On any given day, some 500 million tweets are posted on social media Twitter daily. With such massive information, some tweets will simply fade into oblivion, while others can take an unexpected life of their own. And one such tweet came from a young Thai actor, Vachirarit Shivaravi, who goes by his nickname Bright. Back in April last year, Bright retweeted a friend's post which labeled Hong Kong as a country. Chinese netizens took great offense with the wording and launched a furious tirade against the actor. An army of mainland Chinese cyber warriors started trolling the young actor online. They demanded an apology and threatened to boycott his TV shows, which were popular in China.
Political dissent in China is not allowed. So the social media has virtually no subject that they can take up which would not be immediately censored or their websites are closed down and so on. But if you're nationalistic, as a patriotic Chinese, attacking foreigners, you have a free rein. And that, of course, encourages this kind of aggressive youth incident. Not necessarily, the government is not necessarily behind it at all. It is the young people who use this opportunity to let off steam, and they are free to do so. This will not be censored. This will all be allowed.
The hapless Thai actor quickly deleted his tweet and apologized. But Bright's other massive fan base, the Thais, did not take kindly to the online assault. They took to social media to defend him, turning it into a war of words between the Thais and the Chinese netizens.
The Thai fans were saying that you should not say sorry because Taiwan is not China and Hong Kong is not China either. And so there's this, they start to insult the Chinese fans by saying these things. And so the Chinese fans started to try and insult the Thai fans back by criticizing the government, the Thai government, and the Prime Minister, and even members of the royal family. And so it escalated into a very vicious kind of argument, which should have just fizzled out the way that teenagers call each other's name.
The Chinese embassy in Thailand also decided to throw their weight into the controversy by publishing a lengthy lecture on Facebook, reprimanding the Thai netizens while reaffirming the One China policy. That effectively stiffened the spines of the Thai youths who proceeded to double down on their online warfare.
The Thai youngsters were not chastised by this. They did not feel guilty about what happened. They instead attacked, bombarded the PRC embassy Facebook page with, they hurled insults at them. They said, we are not your colony, and then it went on.
So it became politicized, not by the Thais, but by the Chinese social media, politicized it, and then so aroused the Thai who were in the middle of fighting against authoritarianism and what they considered to be abuse of power in Thailand. They took it up and decided to counterattack. And in the course of it, the Hong Kong people showed sympathy. The young people in Hong Kong said that, oh yes, that's right. You said, this is what we shared, that we're equally against this kind of authoritarianism. And then, of course, Taiwan also joined in.
Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, social media savvy youths were also well aware of the increasingly bitter rift between Thai and Chinese netizens. They were themselves at the forefront of the demonstrations against China's growing encroachment into what they regarded as the internal affairs of Hong Kong. It was in reference to the government's decision to implement the controversial extradition bill. The law, if passed, could allow Hong Kong suspects to be extradited to the mainland to be tried under Chinese law. Hong Kong youths then jumped into the Twitter war in a show of solidarity with their Thai counterparts.
We start having pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong that took this up and tweeted something like, "We thank our Thai friends for standing up for us." And then you have Taiwanese politicians coming out and say, we thank our Thai friends and everything. And so they start to say, we are together. I think the Milk Tea Alliance was something that came out from the Hong Kong activists.
So the Milk Tea Alliance simply is an alliance between Thailand, Hong Kong, and Taiwan of like-minded pro-democracy protesters. And what we hope to achieve in all of our countries is one word, democracy, which we have not yet achieved. For example, for Taiwan, it may be their independence movement. For Hong Kong, it may be against the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, and for Thailand, against the current government, the military authoritarian government right now, for democracy. But ultimately, its goal is for democracy, and we can see that through Twitter, through hashtags, we have inspired so much more movements along together.
And so, #MilkTeaAlliance was born, uniting youths in Hong Kong, Thailand and Taiwan, ostensibly against mainland Chinese netizens. #MilkTeaAlliance generated more than 2 million tweets and trended globally. On Weibo, China's version of Twitter, the hashtag garnered more than 4.6 billion views. But why the use of milk tea as a symbol? How do Hong Kong, Thailand and Taiwan bond over this chosen symbol to the exclusion of China?
咁咧就有人咧提出咗咧，即係因為呢個3個地區咧本身咧都係會即係奶茶係其中一個好普及嘅一種飲品嚟嘅咁樣。 泰國奶茶啊、台灣珍珠奶茶，香港就係一啲港式奶茶咁樣。咁咧就紅其他地區，例如中國就唔會飲奶茶，去飲茶或者飲其他咁樣。咁咧就好似咧就形成咗佢哋有網絡上就講佢哋形成咗一個叫做奶茶聯盟。除咗頭先講奶茶本身一個即係象徵啦，但係實際上咧，其實佢哋咧就好似形成咗一個大家都好似對抗中國嘅一個即係地區性嘅一啲民間嘅一個。
Despite the solidarity expressed in the Milk Tea Alliance, the grievances and goals are different. 18-year-old Akasan Opila, or Ang Ang as her friends call her, is a spunky and outspoken teenager who lives in Bangkok with her parents. Even though she's busy with her schoolwork, Ang Ang was still able to make time to attend numerous anti-government rallies and be part of a movement which calls for change and political reforms in the country.
The young people are disappointed because right now what we see are a bunch of dinosaurs who are sitting in a parliament, people from such an older generation that do not understand the struggles of us today. They do not understand the values, the fundamental values of basic human rights, of freedom of speech, of equality, that you should treat everyone with respect in terms of right, dignity, and respect regardless of socio-economic background.
The youth movement in Thailand emerged in early 2020, and that happened soon after the popularly elected leader of the Future Forward Party, 42-year-old Thanathorn Junkrunkruangkit, was disqualified from holding office by the country's constitutional court. His disqualification, coupled with the dissolution of his powerful anti-military opposition party, angered the students.
So there was some new excitement among the new generation, young voters, who suddenly discovered that they have a voice in Thai politics. But later on, after 1 year, the Future Forward Party was dissolved. So a big disappointment, a big letdown among these young voters. And together they were also led by political agitation on the internet, on social media, and that's what we see.
The protesters were also inspired by Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. From the 2014 umbrella movement, which called for the right to pick their own leaders based on universal suffrage, to the Occupy Central protests, which paralyzed the financial hub for 79 days. Hong Kong pro-democracy protesters were very vocal in their opposition to Beijing's tightening grip on the city.
2019 one was a follow-up, but it was really part of a longer history of 5 or 6 years of very deep feelings about democracy in Hong Kong and the increasing suspicion that the Chinese are imposing their will on the Hong Kong government and taking away their freedoms.
Incidentally, in 2014, across the straits, Taiwan was also having its own moment of pushing back against their government. The Sunflower Movement was a student-driven protest against former President Ma Ying-jeou's attempts to establish cozier relations with mainland China, without consultation and approval from the electorate.
But after some flower movement, Taiwanese youths start to feel that yes, we can shout it out loud. We can let our voice to want government to do something. If we don't like China, we just speak out. If we want a more fair, more better society, we just speak out. If we want something, you just protest. And Taiwanese have long forget we can protest. So in the MTA, you can see that Taiwanese are very freely, whatever they want, whatever they speak, they just do it.
Gregory Wong is a well-known face in Hong Kong. The 42-year-old is a TV actor and model. More recently, though, he's been in the limelight for another reason. He's a vocal supporter of Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. Now, he's facing criminal charges of rioting and illegal entry for his part in the storming of LegCo in 2019.
We're trying to find new directions. We're under a lot of pressure. There's been a state of the new national security law in Hong Kong since the 1st of July. And there's been a lot of crackdown on the sort of people who stand for the anti-government. They're fighting for a future that they're trying to achieve, that there is at least a chance or an opportunity for them to have a life they long for, instead of just slaving away, trying to pay their rent, trying to make ends meet, and also being suffocated of just voicing their needs out.
While the Milk Tea Alliance specific goals and causes are different in Hong Kong, Thailand and Taiwan, the modus operandi or MO of the protests share many similarities. From helmets and gas masks to flash mobs and hand signals, Thai students are drawing on the experience of Hong Kong's young activists in their own fight for change. Who will ultimately have the upper hand? The hand symbols, hard hats, goggles, gas masks and umbrellas. Protest methods and tactics which are strikingly similar to each other, both in Hong Kong and Thailand. If in Hong Kong, protesters are using their raised palm to symbolize their 5 key demands, in Thailand, the 3-finger salute is used to represent the values of freedom, liberty and fraternity. And this is one of the hallmarks of the Milk Tea Alliance, where student movements are learning strategies from each other across borders in their fight for greater democracy.
I have noticed leaders of the student movement in Thailand who started to connect with the student activists in Hong Kong and in Taiwan earlier, even before this Twitter incident. Netiwit Chotipatpaisan at Chulalongkorn University attempted to invite Joshua Wong to join a panel discussion at Chulalongkorn University, and at that point Joshua Wong was captured at the airport and sent back to Hong Kong. That was a major incident. And then after that we have student activist leaders who spent their summers studying Chinese in Taipei. And then they start to connect with Thai students in Taipei as well. And since the Milk Tea Alliance has emerged, you start seeing Taiwan independent flag and Hong Kong protesters flag.
And the authorities, short of using brute force, can only play catch-up with the protesters as the youths keep ahead of the game using the latest technology.
These are people now using the technology much more effectively, influencing the lives of everybody on certain causes that they have taken up. The social media today enables young people to connect so quickly that you can rouse millions, at least hundreds of thousands on the streets in a matter of minutes. And that is extraordinary. That could not have happened. In the past, it took a long while.
我嘅睇法就係其實即係其實好多政府咧，其實都唔係好知點樣回應呢種嘅新嘅趨勢。佢哋即係好多都係仲係用一種好傳統嘅方式。舉個例，即係例如香港嗰個反送中運動啦，咁即係政府想建立一個對話平台咧，佢都係用翻好傳統嘅一種即係我哋嘅 town hall meeting 咁嘅形式咁去即係。即係都會咁嘅對話，咁但係其實網絡上其實好多有相關嘅討論，其實已經網絡上已經完全開展到。 咁所以我就睇唔到暫時即係政府真係有一個好好嘅方法回應呢啲咁嘅發展趨勢。
Napasong Sangdoing is a second-year political science student in Bangkok. The 20-year-old has been attending the student rally since last year in support of the youth movement's demands for changes to the Thai constitution. Her political participation has created tensions between her and her parents, especially on issues relating to the country's most revered institution, the Thai monarchy.
Just like the boomers, the other boomers, they are loyalists, they are conservative, but I'm not. They got angry, they got frustrated. And once they learned that I want to destroy monarchy, they say that they got to put me in jail. And that was really insane. We see that the people in politicians' party or political leaders are ignorant or ignore themselves, and we see that they didn't care about us, they didn't care our voice.
Napasong's anti-government sentiment is a common refrain amongst people of her generation, not just in Thailand, but also in Hong Kong and Taiwan, the triumvirate of the Milk Tea Alliance. Lim Kiang is an undergraduate at the National Taiwan University. He also feels that the ruling elites are simply out of touch with the real needs and aspirations of the young people. And that has caused a certain degree of bitterness, disappointment, and anger.
We are facing a very hardship because we faces a very low salary but high price, high house price, high everything is very expensive in our lives, and we have no future because we see all the jobs are very low salary, and our government doesn't want to hear about the voices about youths.
The youths who make up the alliance also see the governments as being less interested in their welfare. But why is there an apparent disconnect between the ruling establishment and the new generation? Are the accusations leveled at the governments fair and warranted? And what is causing the gulf of misunderstandings between the two sides?
The government is definitely letting down the youth, and it's a habit. It has become a habit in Thailand. The coup has become a habit. The military dictatorship has become a habit. These are obsolete habits that cannot work in the age of the internet. The older generation that still wants to control finds it impossible to control, and so they instead want to fight with the younger generation, and it's also impossible to fight with the younger generation. I think if they really want to make change for the better, they need to start to try and learn to communicate with the younger generation.
25-year-old Tachapon is a Thai student in the Taipei University of the Arts. She's also the spokesperson for the Taiwan Alliance for Thai Democracy, or TATD. She said the freedoms and democracy in Taiwan inspired her and other Thais to form the activist group. The idea is to show her fellow citizens back home of the need to correct the government's missteps so as to create a better future for themselves.
Basically, we want better future and how to achieve that. And we know that the system that we have is not what they call like democratic system, like because like our government claim to be democracy, democratic government, democratic country, and when we realize that that is not actually the truth for the younger generation, when they don't see their future, it's like, the rising the rising of like cost of living, rising price of like housing fee, rental fee, like they know that they will end up like study so hard, but then they don't really have like good job or good life that they kind of expect, or what the system have been telling them that they will receive in the end.
However, some observers say the young generation of today is not entirely blameless. They feel that the youths cannot simply point fingers at the government when things don't turn out the way they like.
You can have dreams, but if your dreams are not fulfilled, it doesn't mean it's a failure on the part of government. In democracy, you can only be successful by working hard, have enough knowledge to earn a living with other people. So, but you can see that the expression like that is the expression of the young people who does not have a lot of experience. But there is no shortcut for success. And the envy, if you want to call it, does not help.
I think they are less patient, unlike our generation. The older, we tend to take time to do things, work slowly to achieve things. But this younger generation, they seem to be in a big rush everywhere, every time. They want instant connection. They want instant gratification. They want instant recognition. They want more likes on their posting. So I think it's a different expectation that we see from this young generation. And when the rest of the society, the rest of the country cannot respond, cannot give them what they want, they are unhappy. And they look around, try to do things their own way.
Apart from their own governments being the target of their anger, it appears that the Milk Tea Alliance has another common enemy, China. The social media war between the MTA netizens and the Chinese netizens have a distinctive tone. On the MTA side, the insults and attacks are witty, self-deprecating and humorous, while the Chinese responses are aggressively nationalistic. The question is, if there's a wave of angry young people across Asia, as seen in the Milk Tea Alliance, why aren't Chinese youths angry as well? "24-year-old Chen Beibei lives in Anhui province in eastern China. The freelance video editor identifies herself as being part of the /youth or /generation. This generation refuses to be defined by just a single identity, nor will it stick to one career path. Instead, the /youths are inclined to take up multiple roles or professions, and they're very active on social media. True to her optimistic nature, Beibei sees many opportunities ahead of her.
因为我喜欢的就是选择性太多了，现在不是流行斜杠，就是有斜杠青年这个说法嘛，就是你可能会在很多方面都有涉猎，就我很想去做尝试，很多事情我都想去做尝试，因为我现在剪辑视频也有了自己的粉丝嘛，然后我有倾向于做自媒体这一块，互联网，然后我对影视这一块是很感兴趣的，我目前就是在了解中，在尝试，不断的尝试中，然后我也想学到更多的东西，技术，只是一个在职的状态，我之后应该还是会去工作，还是会去找工作的，对，因为还年轻嘛，未来一切皆有可能。
Beibei says her positive outlook mirrors the general sentiment of the new generation of Chinese, many of whom have reaped the benefits of a rising and economically powerful China. They appear very confident and are hopeful about the future. Beibei thinks that the Chinese government has done well in providing good education for the people. It has also opened up vast opportunities for people like her to excel in her career. She therefore sees no reason why she should harbor any feelings of ill will towards the government.
肯定有进步的地方啊，那不然怎么会有这么多理智的发声者呢？愿意发声的人呢？国家更开放了，能接受到的知识更多了，眼界更开阔了，那么建立起来的思想就更全面、更客观。
However, the same can't be said about youths who now make up the Milk Tea Alliance in places like Hong Kong, Thailand, and Taiwan. Instead of trying to find an amicable solution to their problems, they've decided to vent their anger at the military-dominated government, as in the case of Thailand. As for Hong Kong and Taiwan, one of the key unifying force of the Milk Tea Alliance is the feelings of hostility towards China. In fact, the symbol milk tea has been deliberately chosen to differentiate themselves from Beijing.
Tea is a Chinese thing. Tea is fundamental to Chinese culture. But Chinese tea, they don't put milk into. So Milk Tea Alliance is countries that have heavy Chinese influence in them, but they're also cosmopolitan. They also have a connection to the world. So they drink their tea with milk. So these are the countries that drink tea, but not Chinese tea. It's milk tea.
Hong Kong actor and pro-democracy activist Gregory Wong, for example, finds it important to defend Hong Kong's basic freedoms, judicial independence and the rule of law, as enshrined in the document called the Basic Law. The law also forms the basis of the principle of one country, two systems model. And that's the reason why he's been resisting what he regards as Chinese interference into the internal affairs of the Special Administrative Region.
What we were trying to prevent was the red line coming down like this. But then it wasn't our fault because we sort of foresee the red line coming down anyways, so we're trying to stop it here. We're trying to stop people being sent back to China so quickly. We're trying to stop them getting involved in our legislative system too quickly, in our justice system too quickly, in our press freedom of speech too quickly, in our human rights issue too quickly.
But is the finger pointing and singling out of China as the so-called enemy fair or justified? Mr. Bernard Chan, for one, feels that whatever that has happened so far, including the introduction of the tough national security law in Hong Kong, is not the fault of the central government.
I think China has been very patient with Hong Kong. We never had the national security law for 23 years since Hong Kong returned to China. They've been very patient with us, but the event in 2019 completely changed everything. You know, we completely crossed those lines, so give China no choice to came forward to basically tell us these are the red lines now. You can still have one country, two system, but you can never ask for independence. You cannot try to destabilize China. You cannot you cannot allow foreign forces, to come and use Hong Kong as a base to interfere domestic policy in China. So these are the red lines that they now put in front and center for us to remember. So if you don't cross those lines, hey, life goes on. But if you do, they will come hard on us, because I think they have to make those rules firm to remind us. I think, unfortunately, the event in 2019 was completely changed their perception over Hong Kong. They realized that they can no longer allow Hong Kong just continue the way we have been.
Beibei is aware of the Milk Tea Alliance and its increasing unhappiness over China's growing assertiveness. However, she feels that any criticisms against China will definitely trigger a strong reaction from Chinese netizens.
我们也要注意我们说话的方式。对，有时候如果有更好的表达方式，为什么不用更好的表达方式呢？太偏激的言论，太言辞过激的言论，就很容易引发别人的反感情绪。对，所以既要理智，也要用更好的方式去发声。对，我们国家的言論就這種什麼自由，就是它肯定是建立在我們國家的國情之上的。
民眾咧，其實佢哋接收個信息嗰個接收到個信息好少嚇，咁佢哋咧就即係冇其他地區佢哋享受咁多嘅言論自由啊，或者佢哋喺自己國內咧，基本上就冇咁嘅言論空間，佢哋只不過咧要去到即係其他平台，包括即係 Twitter 咧，先至好似有多啲即係去批評人嘅空間，但係佢哋自己又未必夠膽批評自己嘅國家咁樣，咁所以佢就有一個咁嘅落差嘅話咧，就成為咗佢哋即係批評中國嘅其中一種嘅講法，就點出現咗頭先你講話玻璃心啦，或者會批評佢哋平時自己又唔敢講批評自己嘅國家嘅事，但係出到嚟就即係好似好囂張咁樣。
The rise of China has led to an encouraging young people in China to be more and more nationalistic, on the grounds that China is now rich and powerful, and it had been treated very badly before. Now we should no longer take it. We will react to every attempt to put down China. They will respond aggressively.
China's increasing economic clout as the world's second largest economy, its influence on the international stage, as well as its growing wealth, have also become a source of pride for the citizens who have benefited from its rapid transformation.
You should ask the 1.4 billion people in China if they are happy with the current status quo. Chinese people, especially after COVID, find the model in China is actually working. And they look at the rest of the world, they actually find it, I think COVID actually have changed a lot of things. I think if you ask an average Chinese person today in China, they're actually quite happy that their government figured out a way how to contain the virus. So they no longer, most Chinese people in China no longer find this Western democracy is that much better than their model.
But China's own popularity at home has been met with suspicion by those who believe that democracy should be allowed a chance to succeed. And the Milk Tea Alliance is certainly one of them. Uprisings led by angry young people in Asia are not new. To name a few, the May 4th movement 1919 in Beijing, the 1973 popular uprising in Thailand, as well as the 1989 Tiananmen Square incident were led by students. But the Milk Tea Alliance as a pan-Asian democracy movement driven by youths, largely on social media, is the first of its kind. Will this online movement yield real-world impact? How will it succeed? As the street protests grew, and as the online grouping of the pro-democracy supporters from Hong Kong, Thailand and Taiwan gathered pace, the increasing dissent had put governments under a lot of pressure. Today, all acts of resistance and open public defiance have been met with the full force of the law. For example, from November last year to January, Thai authorities have detained and charged over 50 people under the country's strict lèse majesté law for insulting the king. Violating the law, widely known as Article 112, is punishable by 3 to 15 years imprisonment. Over in Hong Kong, a similar chill is descending on the pro-democracy movement. In December last year, well-known youth leaders, including Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow, were sentenced to jail for 14 and 10 months respectively. 8 pro-democracy lawmakers were also arrested in November. Hong Kong's entire pro-democracy camp later resigned en masse from the legislature after Beijing authorized the removal of 4 members of their group. The government's hardline approach in dealing with the protesters, coupled with the surge in the number of COVID-19 cases, have put the brakes on large-scale public demonstrations.
That's why we see that the protest leaders are slowly backing down. And that's why they say now is consolidation time, rethinking back to the drawing board what they can do this year. But now we have this new COVID-19, the second wave, so they have to wait a little bit longer.
For now, as the protests begin to subside, and as cities across Asia are in various lockdown modes due to COVID-19, questions remain about the fate of the Milk Tea Alliance. Will it lose momentum in the face of increasing crackdowns? Many observers believe that in spite of all the initial vigor and excitement, it may one day lose steam. If anything, the burst of momentum appears unsustainable, at least for now.
我觉得这一个，因为这个是算是以迷因为主的一个运动嘛，那它本身又有幽默跟好玩的成分在里面，所以当然一开始你会觉得说，可能如果没有什么延续性的话，它可能就会慢慢消解。
No, I don't think there's much to worry about the milk tea alliances. I mean, after all, we're talking about different issues in different territories, so it's not like we have to worry about some of those issues will overspill to Hong Kong. No, but we are worried about some of our local issues. We still have to address the local issues. But not so much over milk tea alliance itself.
There is an end which is predictable up to a point, and that is almost all these young movements, they're not the winners. They don't win in the end. They win the first round and make a great impact, but they are made use of by the elites. Both the elites of the government who either use them for their purposes, or those who are in opposition use them for their purposes. And it's a question of which of those elites, the elites in power, the ruling elites, or the opposition elites, succeed in capturing the momentum and the activism of the young to make their cause successful. And in the end, they take over. The young people don't end up taking over anything. And I'm not being cynical. The historical record shows that the young people can start something, but in the end, the winners are usually the already elder political groups that take up any opportunity to advance their cause. So there's a sad ending to most of these stories, unfortunately.
Yet, there are other observers who feel that history is on the side of democracy. They feel that imposing restrictions on civil liberties and freedom will one day backfire on the governments.
If we are ever going to democratize, we are going to democratize because the economy collapses. And we're heading towards that way. We can see it happening in other countries. This was how it happened in Indonesia. General Suharto stepped down from power after 30 years because of the Asian economic crisis in 1997. He resigned in 1998. So I think Thailand is heading towards the same direction. We can still express our frustration towards the dictatorship. And I think that I would say Thailand is the last beacon of hope of the Milk Tea Alliance. And so I think in other words, we could probably say that the battle has been won in Taiwan already. The battle is more or less lost in Hong Kong, but Thailand is the last battle that is still going on, and everyone is still focusing on how it might turn out.
Not all is lost. Despite the increasing clampdown by authorities as well as the ongoing pandemic threat, youth like Tachapon continue to be hopeful about the future. Until today, she remains steadfast to her cause and struggle for democratic freedom. In fact, she expressed hope that the Chinese netizens who have been on a crusade against those who have attacked their model of government will turn out to be her allies one day.
We have to distinguish between CCP and Chinese people. They are not the same. I think like Chinese people is like Slim in Thailand, that they are still like trapped under this ideology that has been constructed by the government, and they don't really have like the access, like the ability to access the information outside that narrative. And I think it's like, even if they believe in that kind of ideologies, you don't have any right to like violate them or to insult them. What they need is not the insult, but the information. And I think these people will be so like resourceful after they attend this like awakening, this like when they really kind of get out of that ideology. They will be like resourceful. What they need, not really insult. You need to turn them to be your allies.
While the jury is out on the fate of the Milk Tea Alliance and whether a virtual world movement can indeed have real-world impact, just the fact that it has come this far as the first Pan-Asian youth movement driven by the internet is extraordinary.
所以他们会觉得说，我们先前就已经站在一起了，那我们现在更应该站在一起。那种凝聚感的 solidarity 可能会更容易形成了。所以以未来来讲的话呢，还是如果说有重大的社会事件，我觉得这会是一个很有效的一个同盟。
Even now, youths in Myanmar have begun to use the three-finger salute as a symbol of defiance and resistance against the new military regime in Myanmar. On February 1st, 2021, the military staged a coup which toppled the democratically elected government of democracy icon Aung San Suu Kyi, cutting short Myanmar's long transition to democracy. The democracy activists are now demanding the release of Ms. Suu Kyi. They also want the army generals to step down and bring the country back to its democratic path. Hundreds of thousands of people have taken to the streets in major cities of Yangon, Mandalay and Naypyidaw, led by, not surprisingly, young people. Once again, the power of social media like Facebook and Twitter are being harnessed to drive the protests. But will the events in Myanmar help inject a new life to the already fledgling Milk Tea Alliance and help it regain its footing? Can the fight against authoritarianism by this democracy movement be sustained? And who will ultimately have the upper hand?
Aung San Suu Kyi's support came from the young people. If not for the young people, the military will still be around. I mean, Aung San Suu Kyi's cause would not have come this far, even though people say that she hasn't gone far enough, but she has got, the fact she's still popular and come this far began with the support of young people who were thoroughly disgusted by the corrupt military in Myanmar. The young people know what they can and get away with. Of course, they try to fight it and they have many cunning ways of getting around it, but it is a continual battle between those who manipulate or control the cyberspace and those who are using it to fight back. But that is, I think, an ongoing thing. I don't know who will win that one in the end.